Recording in progress.
Call to order the regular hybrid meeting of the Rio Dell City Council. Roll call, please.
Mayor Barnes.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Carter.
Here.
Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Councilmember Woodall.
Here.
City Manager Knopf.
Here.
Chief of Police Connor.
Here.
Finance Director Dillingham. Here. Community Development Director Caldwell.
Here.
Water Roadway Superintendent Jensen.
Here.
Wastewater Superintendent Taylor.
Here.
Management Analyst Sanborn.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public presentations. This is the time for persons who wish to address the council on any matter not on this agenda and over which the council has jurisdiction. As such, a dialogue with the council or staff is not allowed under the Brown Act. Items requiring council action not listed on this agenda may be placed on the next regular agenda for consideration if the council directs, unless a finding is made by at least 2/3 of the council that the item came up after the agenda was posted and is of an urgency nature requiring immediate action. Please limit comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Is there any? Welcome, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon Wolf, 3 Taylor Street. Thank you. It's nice to be back in person. I just wanted to mention, my family's been going through a lot with conservatorship with my mom. And hopefully you guys will be able to visit the website. We have public records posted. Because what we're going through is remarkable. And you really have to see it to believe it. Thank God I have a dark sense of humor, because this is remarkable what we're going through. I put it out there as a warning because I tell everybody, because it can happen to anyone. My mom had her documents made that designated who cares for her, clearly written down. And it doesn't matter if a bad attorney targets your family or if the judge just doesn't care. I also mention it because the state is going to be expanding conservatorships greatly. Right now, holy cow with the system, huge problems. They're going to be expanding it tremendously with the care court proposal that's going through, as well as multiple diversion programs to expand out diversion. There's other initiatives as well for conservatorships to deal with serious, real issues with mental health problems, with aging populations. The problem is real. You know, it's not like there is an easy solution out there, and I'm not saying that there is. But the state is proposing to expand conservatorships tremendously, in particular in the care court one and in mental health. But they don't have the staff to do it because they simply don't exist, as everyone knows. So they're creating lower level positions. They're called paraprofessionals to do the psychological evaluations, to do the legal work, to do all of the steps that you normally would have a qualified professional to do. And they're going to provide some training. It's going to be a few hours of training. They're also expanding out mental health in schools as well. And they're doing something similar because they don't have staff. They're reducing the standards in order to fill the staff and get the bodies in there. Because again, the need is real. But that just scares the heck out of me because there's no consideration of any of the consequences of any of this stuff. There's a problem. The state's been sued at the wazoo for what's called the incompetent to stand trial population. It's called the IST population. It's a huge issue statewide. Look it up at the League of Cities, CSAC, anybody, and they'll tell you about the problems. It's a real problem. That's what care court is about, is to address the front end of it, the people that are referred into the system. Because at the back end, they're choking. Just today, it's, oh my gosh, it was like 892 people are on the IST wait list right now, on the wait list to get through. And they're returning them back to the communities because the state isn't taking them. So all communities will be taking back the IST populations of people that came from their communities. And the state will make sure that we have the resources to provide to them, as they did when they closed the mental health facilities years ago. So we can imagine how well that will go. The other point I just want to make is the surplus that everyone is counting on to deal with a whole lot of this, and they desperately need to put infrastructure investment everywhere. The surplus only exists for right now. I encourage everybody to read the legislative analyst report that just came out on the May revise, and there was one that he did previously. It'll keep you up at night if you read the fiscal portion of it. Because as soon as the state surplus reaches a certain level that it is really close to, in kicks multiple constitutional amendments that were passed by popular initiative that are contradictory for the funding. The last I read, double check me on the numbers, for every dollar, we lose $1.60 in the budget. I mean, it's that nuts, okay? It's scary, it's coming very shortly, so hopefully everyone looking at budgets keeps that in the back of their mind. And again, that's going to play into the services that are required to deal with all the problems that we have to deal with. So I have no solutions to offer you. I've only come to disturb you and offer this information. I do hope that you look at the information on our website. The conservatorship of Barbara, that's my mom. Take a look at it yourself, because really the documents stand for themselves. That's how we've managed to do all the things we've done over the years with public advocacy, is the documents. The best thing to use are the documents themselves that are created. The words that people say, the documents that they write. So that's what we've used. It's public record, it's all out there for everyone to see. It didn't help us necessarily, but it might help someone else. It may help someone that you love, and so I put it out there. Just because we all have loved ones that are getting older and will need. Thank you, and again, it's nice to see everybody in person.
Thank you very much. That's very, very good information. So thank you for sharing it. Are there any emails or hands? Did you have anything?
No.
Okay. Are there any emails or hands raised? And we will close public presentations and move on to the consent calendar. Is there any item that a council member or public wishes to remove from the consent calendar? I'm going to pull item 1. Hearing none. Is there a motion to pass items 2 and 3 on the consent calendar?
And 4.
Oh, yeah, that's April 19th.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Did you get it? Do you want to-
A motion to, thank you. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve consent calendars item 2 through 5? This is May 3rd. Okay. Miss one meeting. Miss one meeting. To approve items 2 through 4 on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Motion carries 5-0. And I just pulled item 1 because I wasn't here, so is there a motion to approve item 1?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And
No, I'm voting yes.
And I don't know how I'm voting yes, I'm abstaining. So motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. We'll move on to staff communications, page 25 in our packets.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes and members of the council, just for public informational purposes, there will be a COVID vaccine clinic tomorrow, Wednesday, the 18th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and it's located at the fire hall. We are monitoring the situation with the county on some of the upticks, particularly in the Bay Area. But there's no cause for alarm, but definitely a good reminder to get your vaccination. The annual community cleanup day was held on Saturday, May 7th. Attendance was good and no vehicles were turned away during the allotted time. And a total of just under 27 tons of material were collected and removed. And on your packet, inside of your packet on page 29 is a summary of this year's community cleanup collection that breaks it down between green waste, metal, and trash, and describes the equipment used, all for the past 4 years in addition to this year. So with that, I will go ahead and return it to the mayor if there's any other questions or comments for staff.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Barnes. I have a question for the chief, page 27 of the packet, about 2 drug overdoses for 30-year-olds. Was there red flags and warning signs that relatives?
So in one of the cases, the family was completely unaware of any drug abuse by the deceased. And in the other, there was a history of drug abuse, but nothing that was indicated something like this would happen.
It's a tragic, goes beyond sad. It was by far the low point in reading through the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodall.
No questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter.
I had a follow-up from Gordon, so I'm going to bring it back to the dark part. I'm sorry. There was a third.
There have been 4 people who've died in the last 2 weeks that the police department has responded.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman on Oval who was elderly and had numerous health issues. There is believed to be a history of drug abuse from some of the statements that the responding officer was given. And then one of our homeless population passed away down off of Edwards, believed to be of natural causes, but partially alcohol contributed.
I wasn't sure if that was another overdose or if it, okay.
Doesn't appear to be, but again, it's kind of what you believe from what you see when you get there. The real determining factor is when they do a toxicology screen and do more of an analysis. I don't know that they'll do a full autopsy because that's expensive, but they usually do kind of a primary. They'll look over the body and they'll do a tox screen.
Thank you. It's a shame.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilson.
Yeah, I just had a question on the Caltrans Bridge. That's the north end of town.
Yeah.
What is the follow of
So Caltrans is wanting to work with the city in terms of potential water line relocation around the bridge. They are proposing, as I understand it, to replace the green metal portion of the bridge and do a retrofit on the rest of it. So potentially the green metal structure would be going away and being, turned into a typical deck bridge, is my understanding. We have outreached to Caltrans to come and give a presentation to this council on that particular issue, but they have cited that there have been issues with the bridge, its age, the height clearance for the bridge is not high enough. There have been accidents in the past where the bridge has been damaged. So they are working on that, and we do expect a presentation in the next month or two from Caltrans.
that? That is a state bridge. It's not liability of the city.
No, it's a state bridge, and if you notice, it's in very much disrepair in terms of the painting, the aesthetics of it definitely needs an update. And, you know, based on the work that was performed on the Rio Dell Scotia Bridge, the Eagle Prairie Bridge, you know, where they wanted to close that bridge entirely for 6 months to repair it. Likely they would have to do the same thing there to do a repair and repaint the structure. So they have been looking at it seismically, that it doesn't meet the current standards, and have been looking at various options, including creating one central bridge and decommissioning both the cement bridge on the southbound lanes and the northbound. But I think what they have decided is to do the retrofit on the northbound side.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I have no questions. I was wondering about the bridge too, so glad that was clarified. Are there any hands raised or emails? Is there anyone, will either of you have a question about the, okay, then I will close the item of staff updates and we will move on to special presentations. Presentation by the Humboldt County Homeless Task Force, page 30 in our packets.
Mayor Garnes, members of the commission, our housing element, in fact, I believe almost every housing element in the state is required to get an update from the local homeless task force on the status of the homeless folks in our community and the services they provide. We are lucky to be joined by Robert Ward and Jacqueline Culleton from the Department of Health and Human Services. And in your packet, starting on page 31, is the PowerPoint presentation that they're going to go through. In attachment 2 includes some information regarding the housing outreach and mobile engagement program. They call it the home program. It's a 2022 report. It will not be presented, but it was provided in case your council wanted to review it and ask any questions of the folks from the HHS. With that, I'll turn that over to Robert and to Jacqueline.
Thank you and welcome for being here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. This is Robert Ward. I can hear myself echoing. But I'll just try and move forward here. It's kind of hard to talk when you can hear yourself getting played back. Okay, that fixed it. Great. All right, so I will share my screen. And okay, so I am the Housing and Assistance Coordinator with Health and Human Services Administration. I've been working on homelessness issues in Humboldt County since 2015. Thank you so much for having me. I've adapted this from a presentation that we did at the Homeless Coalition meeting in November. Anybody that wants to sign up for my email list, I would encourage you to email me rward@co.humboldt.ca.us. I send out meeting agendas and all sorts of things that people send me regarding housing and homelessness in Humboldt County. And you all are welcome to attend those meetings and get the emails. So first off, we have a Humboldt community resource list. If anyone has questions, please feel free to interrupt me. If you click on this link down here, you will get that very long list. The target audience is not the general public, but rather, professionals that are looking to assist people. It is pretty intimidating, but there are a lot of resources, which is great. So we have the Hope Center in Eureka. It offers classes and recovery support groups. They have their calendar posted online, and you can see all the different sorts of activities that are available on a daily basis to help anyone that's struggling with mental health difficulties. We have our housing support info sheets for CalWorks is part of DHHS, but for individual programs and family programs, we have the Housing Outreach and Mobile Engagement Program, which Jacqueline will talk about in a little bit. We have programs for, well, people on general relief. We have the Housing and Disability Advocacy Program. So if people are in need of SSI or SSDI or veterans benefits application assistance, you can contact General Relief for information about that. We also have, we have a lot of funding for families experiencing homelessness. So anybody that, you know, a pregnant woman or any families with children, I would strongly encourage you to contact CalWORKS. Apply for benefits. If you're eligible for the cash aid, you may well also be eligible for housing assistance. That includes temporary homeless assistance to get into a short-term motel, and also longer-term assistance with rent, liaison services to try and, you know, negotiate with a landlord to rent an apartment to you. And we have a program for people that are involved with child welfare services called Bringing Families Home that provides the same sorts of services as the CalWORKS Housing and Assistance Program. 211. Anytime you don't know what to do, feel free, or I would encourage you to call 211. People can enroll in the coordinated entry system there, which is a requirement to get into certain state and federally funded programs. But they can also help connect people with all sorts of resources that are available in the community. The Housing Authority. We have all Housing Authority wait lists are open. There are separate wait lists for various programs. So we have the Section 8 or Housing Choice Voucher Program wait list, the Public Housing wait list, which is the public housing is all located in Eureka, and then family housing and senior housing. So people need to apply for each one of those separately, and I believe their application, at least for Section 8, is now available online at Eureka Humboldt HA.org. You can see the link here. Nation's Finest. This is our one-stop shop for any veterans experiencing homelessness. They have emergency shelter, transitional housing, which offers stays of up to 2 years at their facility in Eureka. They almost always have space available. They also have a rapid rehousing program. Rapid rehousing, by the way, these are programs that provide temporary rental assistance, limited to 2 years or less generally, and landlord negotiation services and services to help people stabilize in housing once they get in. And they can also potentially connect people with the Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing Program, which offers indefinite rental assistance and services for disabled vets. We have the Betty Quan Chin Day Center. I send out a calendar of events at the Day Center monthly. So again, feel free to sign up. And the Betty Chin operates a couple different shelters. Some are for families with children. The one pictured in the bottom right here is the Blue Angel Village in Eureka. So anyone that's would be interested in staying there can get information about that at the Day Center or by calling. There are also various programs operated by the City of Eureka that are funded through contracts with DHHS that people can apply for by contacting the Day Center. It's called the Eureka Uplift Program. The Eureka Rescue Mission. If someone is in need of shelter tonight, and especially if they are a man, this is the one spot where you're essentially guaranteed to get shelter tonight if you show up at the right time. You can't get in the middle of the night, for example. And the women's shelter, I understand, does fill up sometimes, so best to call ahead. Women and children's shelter, I should say. St. Vincent de Paul. So the reason why you can you can expect to get a bed at the Eureka Rescue Mission if you are a man is because St. Vincent de Paul will open up an overflow shelter if it's ever necessary, if the men's side fills up. And they do say, I haven't heard of this actually happening, but it's interesting. I know I just said the women's shelter fills up, but they do say they would open this up for women and children as well, potentially. They also serve meals there on a daily basis. Arcata House Partnership is a nonprofit based in Arcata, but they provide services mostly around the Humboldt Bay area. They have an emergency shelter. They now have a street outreach program, or I should say they have an adult singles shelter, a family shelter program, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, and permanent supportive housing. And they have a drop-in center as well, 501 9th Street. We have Food for People in Eureka. The Affordable Homeless Housing Alternatives has a mobile shower and hygiene program. If you're interested in having these people stop in Rio Dell, you can contact them at this email address. But they're currently doing services in Eureka, McKinleyville, and Redway. The Youth Service Bureau at RCAA currently has beds available for youth in their transitional housing program. They have a youth shelter for underage, unaccompanied youth. They have a drop-in center and a street outreach project. And they also, they don't mention on the slide, but they do have, well, they do over here. They have rental assistance and homelessness prevention services available as well. It's funded by the county with funds that we're getting from the state through the Homeless Housing and Assistance Program, also known as HAP. The Humboldt County Office of Education can assist people with school enrollment. Families and youth that meet their rather broad eligibility criteria are entitled to certain extra services, the transportation thing being one of the biggest benefits. You know, often people that are unstable with their housing have to move a lot. So there can be transportation services so that kids don't have to change schools. The Grove at CR, I'm actually not sure what's happening with this program right now. I reached out to them to try to get an update and haven't heard back. So I'm not sure what's going on with the Grove. And then Humboldt State University, now Cal Poly, does have an emergency housing program for students where they, you know, try and help people find housing. Cooperation Humboldt has a street outreach program, mostly in Eureka. Street outreach programs, by the way, I mean, it sounds self-explanatory, but we go out looking for people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and we try to assist with basic needs and connect people with shelter and permanent housing and other services. There's also a group called SOHUM Housing Opportunities. It's part of the South County Homes for All Alliance that is doing street outreach in the Avenue of the Giants area, all the way down to Garberville, Redway, possibly Benbow, I'm not sure. And that is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from council?
Oh, just one question for Chief. Does Mary have all this information? Like, because I know sometimes she works for, you know, looking for places for homeless people and.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I will make sure that she does have it if she doesn't now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter?
I have the same question, it's going to be easier, so no, thank you.
Councilmember Wilson? Anyone in the public? Questions? Any hands raised or emails? Then I will just say thank you for your presentation, and we will move on to the next presentation. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Jacqueline, were you gonna say any words?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I just wanted to add a few notes about what we're specifically doing in Rio Dell. So the HOME program is the Housing Outreach and Mobile Engagement Program with DHHS. And we have outreach folks that visit Rio Dell specifically on the second Wednesday of every month from 10 to 12 at the fire department. And I did look and see and notice that in the last quarter, they provided services to about 60 folks there. And they do everything from helping people with navigation around, basic needs and housing support services, to enrolling in CalFresh or Medi-Cal services. And they respond to folks who are experiencing homelessness, both in town and, on the riverbed or in the woods and such there, to help them connect with different resources. I also provided an outcome report that shows some of our outcomes that we're having with the folks that we're supporting. And I just wanted to note that for the folks that we've been supporting in attaining housing, there is a 94% success rate within the first year of those folks staying in housing, and a 72% reduction in jail bookings, and a 58% reduction in hospitalizations once people obtain housing for those folks that have been experiencing homelessness for long periods of time. Do you guys have any questions about the outreach and housing program or what we're doing in Rio Dell?
Thank you. Any questions? There's public hand raised.
Mayor Garnes, if I may, I do have a question. Jacqueline, you indicated you're down here in Rio Dell from 10 to 12 on what days of the month?
It's the second Wednesday of the month. And they're there at the volunteer fire department. They tend to table with the Food for People folks that are there. And then afterwards, they'll do some outreach in town and along some of the areas along the riverbed. And I believe they've, connected with folks at City Hall around specific people of concern, people who are particularly vulnerable.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate you coming. I reached out for questions and have none, so we just want to say thank you for being here, taking the time out to share your information with us.
And if I can, I'll make one final pitch. The answer to homelessness is housing. So if anyone knows anyone of a rental, if you know anyone who has a property that they're interested in renting either to a family or to an individual, please contact us. We provide a lot of support to our landlords and property managers. Please let us know. We'll let you know more about our program. And we would love to work with anybody who has a rental and would like to give an opportunity to any of our clients to rent from them.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Close that item and move on to presentation of the fiscal year 2022-23 recommended budget. Page 63 in our packets. Do you like this? City manager?
We were just discussing how the slideshow pages were gonna get turned.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead and turn it over to Cheryl for the presentation.
Okay, so this item starts on page 63 of your packet. And then you have on page 65, what we like to call the big blue sheet, which has a summary of the budget with the fund numbers going down on the left-hand column and departments going across the top. And we've got the revenues. We've got the beginning fund balance, the revenues, and then the expenses, and then a total of expenses and the ending fund balances. I'm just sort of explaining it just for purposes. And then we have all of the individual detailed sheets for each of the departments and what their individual budgets look like. And should I open it? If there's any questions about that detailed stuff before I start the presentation.
What, any questions? All right. Looks good.
Okay, I'd like to start by thanking the finance team for helping me with this, and Travis helped also. This is technically not in the finance. And so the first slide, we have the City of Rio Dell recommended budget, and then we have the outline. So basically, we're going to cover the timeline, the priority update, meaning things we have done with the past year's priorities. Any budget changes between the current year budget and the proposed next year's budget. We have the total recommended budget and then some detailed slides on information about revenues, expenses, and the general fund. We have a 5-year comparison for the general fund, some capital project information, and some personnel information. So this is the budget process timeline. And basically in March, we start looking at forecasting and gathering information and estimating salaries and benefits. And then in April, we work with all the departments and compile it all together and create the budgets, and everybody looks over them and the city manager looks over them. And then here we are in May, and we bring it to you. This is the first draft of looking at the recommended budget. And then in June, there's an opportunity to look at it again on June 7th, and then for final adoption on the 22nd, 21st. And this is the priority implementation update, meaning these are how staff has used the budget to implement the priorities that the council set. This is also on this little handout that we did, the same information, and maybe easier to read than your packet. But so, we went through economic development. We worked on implementation of the immediate action plan through the facade improvement program, where we're matching 15,000 in qualified work. A number of businesses have submitted applications or going through the process. And then there was the really amazing success at getting 2 Clean California grants approved for the Eel River Trail and the Gateway beautification. And then code enforcement, the new community service officer has been actively working on code enforcement and abatement, and there have been numerous sites cleaned up and vehicles being removed. The counts for staff turnover reduction and retention, the city council approved a number of pay and benefit increases that should help in retaining and recruiting staff, and also use the stimulus money to give everybody some hazard pay stipend. And then cannabis, the upgrades to the Dinsmore water system are just about finished. And the city has been approved for a 5-year extension to implement the organic waste diversion program. And then street work is gearing up. I believe we've completed the street striping and the patching is done and we're getting ready for the asphalt repairs. And that has included some manhole cover corrections and realignments to help with I&I, if I understand correctly, and even some pipe.
About 200 feet of wastewater line was just recently replaced about 2 or 3 weeks ago, so that was good.
And then we completed the water and wastewater rate study. That has been completed and approved. So then this is just basically things that have changed in the proposed budget from the current budget. So salaries and benefits have gone up by 228,000, and that is primarily the result of the retention and recruitment package that was passed. There was some additional funding added for police staffing, and there's also been a police recruit position added in the budget. It's not fully funded. The idea would be that that position is there and you would kind of swap in and out between a vacant position. So there is an additional position in the budget, FTEs, but it's not quite fully funded. Then basically the rest of it is the services and supplies. So the capital projects paid for by the city went down by $175,000. And then we had the power resiliency grant was completed, which is a reduction of $295. But then we have the per capita park grant, which is the multi-use dog park project. Then we have the Clean California grants that I discussed, the Eel River Trail and the beautification. And then we have the state and local fiscal recovery funds included in the budget, and that includes money for sewer upgrades, sewer system upgrades, and for the open space facility project up front here. And then for revenue, we anticipate sales tax to go up by about 175,000. Cannabis is projected to go down by about 250,000 based on current year trends. And then property taxes up by about 40. Transient occupancy tax has actually been going up, and the gas tax has been going up, and then sewer charges are going up because of the rate study change. We got some additional Measure Z grant funding. And then we basically just have all the offsetting revenue for the grant projects that we mentioned above. And then the recommended city budget is 8.9 million compared to 5.6 million the prior year, which is an increase of 3.2 million or about 56%. And that is totally due to putting all of those grants into the budget because we had that information. A lot of times we don't have the information in the time where it coincides with being able to put it in the budget, but this year it was like, cool, we can get it in there and I have to come back with a separate item. And so there you can see the top bar is the grant capital project, which makes it very apparent how much of our budget is made up by those activities. Then police becomes second, and then city capital projects, which is your street paving and other projects that are detailed later on in the report. And then we have your sewer and water budget, debt service, which is basically the debt on your sewer and water departments. And then basically your city manager department, finance department, streets, buildings, and just goes on down to solid waste. And then the city total city expenses, the salaries and benefits make up 30% of the proposed budget, with services and supplies making up 17%, and grant capital projects making up 38%, and city capital projects are making up 10%, and the debt service is 5% for your total $8.9 million budget. And then the revenue, this is revenue.
Here's some results from a search.
Siri was listening to me. So this is city revenue sources by fund. So grants and revenues are 1.04 million, and there is so we are using fund balance, which we'll talk about more later. So the city revenues are not as high as the city expenses, and that is due to money being spent on capital projects. So grants make up the bulk of the project, or the budget, again, 37.8, which is just about 38%, which corresponds to the expenditures, because there's a 1-for-1 there. All of those grants we have were 100% funded with no city match. And then we have the general fund at 22%, and the sewer and water funds making up 17 and 16, and then the street funds and other funds, and the SLESF is the Supplementary Law Enforcement Services Fund, and that helps augment the general fund portion of the police budget. And then here we get into the general fund expenses, and this goes through and shows how your discretionary general fund monies are spent, with the bulk being spent on the police department. And then next is capital projects, city administration, the finance department, planning, facilities and grounds, general government, and the city council, for a total general fund budget of slightly over 2 million. And then we look at our general fund revenue sources. The bulk of the revenues come in from property tax in lieu, BLF. And then the Measure U is 28%, and the Bradley Burns is 20%. So you can see how important Measure U is as a revenue source to the city. And then we have cannabis coming in now at 11%, property taxes at 8%, and franchise fees, which is for electricity, cable, and gas, and then miscellaneous revenue, for a total of 1.76 million, and it's just slightly less than last year, 15. And this is the slide that's different than the one in your packet, and the reason it's different is because we compared it to the year before. Not the current year that we're in. We accidentally had the 2021 year in there. And so the current year compared to the proposed budget for next year are very, very close, just the difference of a decrease of 15,000. So basically, we're anticipating the $250,000 decline in cannabis revenue, but most of it is being made up incrementally in other tax revenue sources. And then this is a slide that shows a 5-year comparison of revenues and expenses in the general fund, with revenues being green and expenditures being blue. And you can see that in 18-19, 19-20, and 2021, the revenues were higher than the expenditures, which helped the city build up a good reserve in the general fund. And then in 21, 22, and 22, 23 is where you start spending those funds on capital projects such as your street repair program. Then this is just, this is a new slide where it shows the unassigned reserves by fund in the budget, or as a percent of the budget. And so you can see how what the actual fund balances are for 19, 20, 2021, and then estimated for 21, 22, and 22, 23. And that basically as a percent of the budget, the reserves are very generous, and the city's actually in a very good place at this point. And the reason it dropped so much in 22, 23 is because the budget has increased due to the grants, but there isn't really any reserves being used as a result of that. And the target is 30%. That's what the policy that we're trying to achieve is 30%. So we're way over policy. And then the next one. And then this is just a detailed slide showing the capital projects that are included in the budget. And I don't know, I might turn that one over to the city manager if he wants to talk about those at all.
Well, so right off the top, you have your asphalt street resurfacing target figure at $450,000. We are currently working as part of your consent calendar. There was a briefing on the slurry sealing project for this later this summer that we're working with the city of Arcata on. What else do we have there? City beautification, so that's unassigned funding for projects that the beautification committee might identify and that the council would approve. We have every year we're trying to do some minor work related to City Hall. So for this current year that we're in, there was funding allocated for some of the last window replacements for the building. We've been working on that for a couple of years with various allocations. So this year, this amount is probably going to be headed mostly to the police department, updating the chief's office, as well as potentially a bathroom remodel over at the police department. The department also requested a storage container for evidence, secure storage facility. And then we have an option for the next chief of police for a replacement for the chief of police vehicle. Moving down into your grant allocations. Oh, we do, okay. So those would be the general fund projects for the year, mostly focused in on the street asphalt resurfacing for next year.
So, and then we have the wastewater and water projects. And I don't know if there's any questions at this point for Derek or Randy, where we can go to the next slides, which are just cover the grants.
Any questions or?
Just one minor. You get a police chief new car for $5,000?
It's 55.
I think it's
55.
I know, I like looked at it at one point, but it's like fine. I think it's because you think it's a dollar sign.
That's what I thought. I saw.
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
The other thing I would just add to that is we would be auctioning off the current vehicle, which is in pretty good condition, and with our experience with the last auction, so that cost will be offset by the sale of the new vehicle or the sale of the current vehicle.
Mayor Pro Tem or Councilman Woodall? Okay, carry on.
Okay, so here we're going to talk about the grants that we completed in the current year. So the water capital improvement plan project was completed. The power resiliency improvements at City Hall and the wastewater facility, which is basically the solar panels on the roof, the generator that is going to be at the side of the building, and then there's going to be the generators down at the wastewater facility. And then we implemented the water and wastewater arrearages program through the American Rescue Plan Act, where we received $81,451 to pass along to the residents of Rio Dell to help pay their bills for during the COVID pandemic shutdown. And then we also had the public-private partnership battery backup for the courtyard that was done through Tesla and the state. And also not up on here, because it's not actually completed, is the sanitary sewer study. And that project, I believe, is about 50% complete. And the state offered up additional funding. So I do believe that GHD is looking at expanding the scope and getting additional funding for the study. And the next one. So these are the projects that were funded and included in the budget, which is the multi-use dog park from the per capita program, the Eel River Trail, the Gateway beautification. So there's $596,150 of money from the state and local fiscal recovery funds, which is ARPA, for wastewater upgrades that would be most likely collection upgrades. And then 140,000 for the open space facility out front here to allow for outside events such as farmers markets. And then there's the sanitary sewer evaluation study because it's funded and still ongoing. And I believe we've spent about half of that, 499,500. And then we've submitted grants for the water distribution system upgrade as a result of the completion of the CIP capital improvement program. And then we've submitted 3.5 million for the Metropolitan Wells Bridge water pipeline retrofit, which is basically making the water pipeline that goes across the bridge more reliable in the event of an earthquake so that we can actually access that water source. And then 1.9 million for the Douglas Redwood tank seismic retrofit to make sure that in the event of an earthquake, it doesn't topple. And then here we have the city organizational chart. And it does have an increase of 1 FTE for the police recruit, which is added at the bottom. And additionally, in the finance department, we are changing the fiscal assistant 1-2 to a senior fiscal assistant so that they're the same staffing level so that we can do more cross-training and have a more robust office in there and not silo people into only doing individual tasks and allow for more flexibility and time off and opportunity for growth. And then this is a slide showing the personnel history. This is FTEs over time for, I believe, 5 years. And basically the different colors are the different department, or no, the different colors are the different years. In each department has so administration has the jump because we added the management analyst, and then the finance department was flat and it has the little decrease because the finance director went to part-time. And then you can see the police department having growth in staff, and then public works had a jump there in 17 or in 18-19 and has remained flat. And then you can see the total overall FTEs across the other graph. And that is it. So the next step is the public hearing on the recommended budget, which will be June 7th. And then adoption of the proposed budget on June 21st. And are there any questions?
Councilmember Carter. I just don't know how you can make all that information understandable. I'm gonna miss you. No questions, but thank you. That was very in-depth. That was very straightforward. If left to read that on my own, I would have had a real headache and not understood a thing. So thank you for making it so clear. I appreciate it.
And we have this little.
I really like it. It's like you knew.
This is kind of the slideshow in a little tiny format.
It's awesome.
And again, I want to thank my team.
All right. Thank you and the team.
Okay. Councilmember Wilson?
The same thing as, you doing, I think, an excellent job as finance director. I've seen changes in our city's financial situation, I think, under your purview. So I appreciate the way you presented it and the job you've done for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodall? No, I went in today and asked Cheryl my questions, and thank you. Everything was clear. From a long time ago when we used to do these, this was great. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Barnes. Again, I really appreciate the work that the finance department has done, and a great presentation by Cheryl. And the summary on one piece of paper is marvelous. We are spending more money than we're taking in, but there's a very good reason for that. We're spending a lot of money on capital projects, and that's why we're drawing down our reserves. That's why we have reserves, is to spend on capital projects. And it's just sound financing. And I think our team for that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. Thank you. I have no questions, but thank you very much, Cheryl. You're not gone yet. You'll be gone. We'll be missing you, but right now, we're still happy that you're here, and we are very appreciative to you, and we are very appreciative to the finance department. So give them our thanks too. Very well done, and I really love this too. It's awesome. Are there public?
I just want to say, I spent the last few days, work days watching state budget hearings, which is just horrifying, and you should try it sometime. It's just nauseating. So thank you. I appreciate the budget presentation that you gave. It was written in English. It was presented clearly. And I wish you could give some tips to the state budget people, because that's not how they're doing it right now. So thank you. I appreciate that information. And then I just had a question with the FTE positions. Are they full right now? What's the vacancy rate? Just because everywhere's got vacancy rates.
I can't break it into a percentage at the moment, but we're down an officer in the police department. Otherwise, it's fully staffed.
Oh.
And we are down to.
Utility and one wastewater.
Okay.
2.5.
So 2.5 in public works. And then I believe we are fully staffed in every other department.
Oh, great. That's awesome. I thought of one other thing, just to horrify you from what I said earlier. The state hospital system, the one that has all the IST patients there, today they said their staffing level is at 53% for state hospitals. 53%. Yeah, okay, so good luck sleeping. All right.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, any hand raised or emails? Then this is just some action you needed rather?
No, we will return to the council next month with the final budget presentation and adoption in June.
Thank you. Then we will close that item and move on to special call items. Purchase of water-filled K-rails for open space events and other public works related use, page 103 in our packets.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. This might have been an item for the consent calendar, but I just decided to have a quick chat with the council about it. As you'll see on page 104 of your packet, the rough idea for an open air events facility has been discussed with the council. And the council has prioritized $140,000, as was in the presentation, for the open space events facility. The idea being that the front of City Hall, including the Memorial Park area and sections of Wildwood Avenue, could be used as a single contained event facility for things like a farmer's market or for Wildwood Days or other events that folks are interested in putting on for the community. The idea being that it would be relatively easy to set up and take down and could add a level of safety for patrons of events in this proposed area. It's also an ideal location because it has the best traffic diversion around City Hall facility to not permanently or massively disrupt the Wildwood Avenue traffic. It's just a slight diversion around City Hall to allow for the events facility. One of the discussions that we had early on with the council is the installation of traffic bollards, so mechanical metal rated traffic bollards that could be either installed in the pavement itself or transported and locked into place. In discussions with staff, in reviewing it, there are cost considerations. One is you'd be really, damaging, or you have to really dig into the road to properly install what are, pretty large structures for the speed rating for the road. So the cost, potentially could exceed the available funding. So we started looking at some more creative solutions to this particular issue, and just the idea of bringing in water-filled or sand-filled traffic barriers that could be easily placed and removed seemed to be much more effective and also cost less than $10,000 to purchase. They also can be moved. So another location is identified in a roadway, or if Public Works is conducting road work, then the barriers could also be repurposed for that throughout the year. So it's adding, kind of killing two birds with one stone, being able to kind of use it for multiple purposes. So the idea is on page 105 of your packet, is just in case you're not aware of the type of facility I'm talking about. They're just the simple, plastic bins that can be filled with either water or sand to provide a traffic barrier and allow that to occur, and still be, somewhat, or still be very visually, it'd be more visual than a series of bollards. So again, this could have just ended up on consent, but I just wanted to chat with the council, make sure that everybody still remembers that we're working on this particular project, and trying to, as a result of COVID, use some of that COVID relief money to create a vehicle for economic development, a facility essentially for very low cost, where open air events can occur and in a safe environment for the public. So we're excited about the project, and just want to make sure that the council's fully aware of the latest developments.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilson, any questions?
I don't really comment. It seemed like a buyout. A lot better than putting the bollards in the concrete. And like I said, these are portable, so I think it's a good solution.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodall?
I'm for it. That's fine.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
When these things are filled, approximately what kind of weight are we talking about?
That is a good question.
And
With sand?
Then follow up.
Yeah, we can follow up with
Yeah, and
that.
then my next follow-up question is, I assume we have a forklift that can handle that, and a trailer that we can put it on and move it.
Yeah, if they're empty weight, all it would take is one or two staff members.
Right.
It was 50 pounds per each unit, empty,
Yeah,
and then we'd actually fill them on site with water, and then drain them,
Drain it down to water here.
and just dump the water here, and then relocate.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter?
I'm for it, one step closer to a farmer's market.
And I am for it as well. Are there any questions? Are there any hands raised, any emails? No? Okay, do you want us to do you need a motion, or do you just want basically you have consensus, you have full consensus?
I think that's good.
Okay. Thank you. Now we'll move on to ordinances. Introduction and first reading of ordinance number 391-2022, amending the city's zoning regulations, chapter 17 of the Rio Dell Municipal Code to be consistent with the California Government Code 65650 at sec. So it states supportive housing law. 65660, low barrier navigation centers law, and 65913, 8.4, state streamlined ministerial approval process by establishing procedures for reviewing ministerial approval applications. Page 106 in our packet. City Manager.
Madam Mayor, members of council, as you indicated, this is the introduction of first reading of ordinance number 391-2022. That is amending the city's zoning regulations to be consistent with state law when it comes to infill development, supportive transitional housing, and low barrier navigation centers. And I did prepare a short PowerPoint presentation for you, and hopefully we can get that up here in just a second. I should say that there are some handouts that are associated with this text amendment. Once the text amendment is effective, which is 3 days after approval and adoption, we will provide these handouts to the city's website. So they would be available for developers or the community members alike. Anyway, as indicated, state law requires jurisdictions to establish ministerial processes. The ministerial processes are non-discretionary. You meet objective development standards like parking lot coverage, building height, setbacks. We are obligated to approve these projects as we were with the Danco Bluff Cottage projects over there on Rigby Avenue. SB 35 is actually having to do with multifamily infill projects in urbanized areas. And of course, we are urbanized areas because we have sewer and water facilities available in these properties in town. SB or AB 2162 has to do with supportive interest in transitional housing projects. And AB 101 has to do with low barrier navigation centers. The next slide, please. SB 35 we're going to talk about first. It basically has certain criteria that has to be met. 2/3 of the floor area must be dedicated to residential uses. As your council is aware, all of our commercial zones allow residential uses on the second floor of mixed-use buildings. So 2/3 would basically have to be, in this case, it could be a 3-story building with the top 2 stories being used for these type of infill multifamily projects. There has to be a certain set aside for LMI affordability people. Again, has to meet objective local development standards, like I just mentioned. And we have to determine that the project is eligible within 60 to 90 days, depending on project size. And our review must be complete within 90 to 180 days, depending on project size. It should be noted that these projects are still subject to design review, as was the Danco project. So we will have a little hand in the design, in the landscaping, which will provide an opportunity for the public to comment on those elements of the project. AB 2162 is supportive housing. Basically has to do with the supportive and transitional housing, and those be allowed in, and they are allowed by law in mixed-use zones, commercial zones, and residential multifamily zones. These projects have to be 100% subsidized and affordable to lower income households. 25% of 12 units, which is ever greater, has to be supportive housing, meaning they provide services on site like the Danco project does. Units must include at least 1 bathroom and 1 kitchen. Again, all of these have to comply with development standards, objective development standards. Again, parking requirements. And I should say there are some exceptions to the parking requirements. If you're within a half mile of a public transit stop, you get out some parking exceptions. If you're within, I believe it's a block, maybe 300 or 400 feet of a park and ride facility like Caltrans offers, you also get some parking exceptions. Other than that, you basically have to comply with all the other objective development standards. Again, we have to determine if the application is complete within 30 days and complete our review within 60 to 120 days, depending on the project size. It should be noted that the projects are also subject to Permit Streamlining Act. The Permit Streamlining Act requires us to notify applicants, regardless of project type, if they are complete within 30 days. And we do that. The last one is AB 101, which is a low barrier navigation center. These are shelters, and they actually touched on it in the presentation of DHHS a little earlier tonight. But these are shelters focused on moving formerly homeless occupants into permanent housing, with case managers helping them connect to services. use by right, again, in multifamily mixed-use zones. Again, we have one residential multifamily property in the city right now, and that is the Danville project, and it is basically built out. We have 3 mixed-use commercial zones. Those are our town center zones, our neighborhood center zone, and our community commercial zone properties. And then the qualified navigation centers must be housing first oriented around people moving into permanent housing, be equipped with information systems, basically computers, have reduced barriers to entry, such as allowing partners, pets, and storage of personal items and privacy. Again, there is a timeline for determining that the application is complete and that we complete the review within a timely manner. In this case, it would be 60 days. Next slide, please. One of the goals or programs that is approved in our housing element requires that we update our zoning regulations and our general plan to accommodate these housing types. And right now, what we're doing with this project is we're establishing those required ministerial provisions. At the Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday night, we are recommending changes to our land use element of the general plan, and then some minor text amendments to our multifamily and commercial zoning districts to accommodate these required uses. Again, one of the goals that we had, and I stated earlier, is that we want to become a designated pro-housing jurisdiction, which opens the door for additional grant funding down the road. And in order to get that designation, these are the hoops that we're going to have to jump through. So we are going to try to get through a number of them this year in an attempt to get that designation as quickly as we can. With that, that's it in a nutshell. As I indicated, I believe it's on page 113. There are some handouts that are available for the public. We posted to our website, describe the processes, the eligibility, the types of projects that are allowed, and then the ordinance itself is on page 126. It is a fairly lengthy revision to the ordinance, and I'm not sure if you actually had a chance to look at all over thoroughly. If you haven't, we will have the second reading and hopefully the approval and adoption at our next meeting, which is June 7th. With that, I answer questions your council may have or members of the community may have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter?
No questions, thank you.
You, Councilmember Woodall?
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Wilson?
So this is required, this is a state mandated, basically like Danco was that we, so we're putting the ordinance in place for that reason. You have it formally done. But if someone comes in and say that we have property that falls into these zones, that we have to allocate a certain amount of that space.
We would be obligated, yeah, even without this ordinance, we'd be obligated to process and approve that project if it meets the state criteria. So all this does is actually locally codify our local regulations to meet the state required elements.
Because I know that was part of the pushback on at least by the community on Danco project, is why are we even allowing this when we really didn't have a say?
We were obligated by state law.
And that's the same thing with this.
Yeah, and that provision of state law, I think, was approved in either 2015 or 2016. So we are late to the game in actually revising our regulations, and that is my fault. And what happened is I was preparing the annual progress report to the Department of Housing and Community Development. And in doing so, I looked at our programs, and you identify the programs that you've made progress on and that you haven't made progress on. And this was one of them that jumped out to me immediately. And that's why I got it to the Planning Commission last month and to your council now. And then there's going to be a couple of follow-up amendments the next month or so.
And I just wanted to call that out so that I guess in the future, when this happens, if we have to come up with property that someone jumps in the middle of and says, we want to put in this housing, which seems to be a popular thing right now. I know they're doing it, they're going through a lot of stuff in Eureka where they're taking parking lots and they're wanting to build buildings, and they're basically forcing this onto the public, which is, I understand that in the presentation, with the homeless issue of what we're dealing with. That also takes away from property which is commercially available, is zone commercial.
And that is
Something
why,
that we would try to develop.
Yeah.
But that the public knows that it's essentially out of our hands and in the hands of the state. To say that we have to do that.
for the most part, we are not required to use our commercial properties for solely these housing projects. It has to be a mixed-use development based on our local regulations, and the state allows for that. And so that's why we have a provision in our zoning regulations that allow for residential uses on the upper floors of commercial buildings. So it wouldn't theoretically displace commercial opportunities, unless it was going to be a 2 or 3 story commercial opportunity. Just the upper stories would be used for housing.
So you wouldn't be required to put on the lower.
No, our zoning regulations would not allow, and the state does not mandate us to do that. Only in the residential multifamily zone.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Thank you. Are there any members of public questions? No? Hands raised? Emails? Then we will. We will continue this to June 7th. We will continue this to June 7th, second reading. Yes, is there a motion to accept the first reading, introduction of first reading?
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second? Second. A motion and a second. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Now we will move on to the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 392-2022, adopting by reference the Rio Dell Police Department's military equipment use policy, number 706. City Manager, page 141 in our packets.
And we'll head over to Chief Connor.
In regards to members of the city council, as the mayor stated, this is the introduction, first reading only of ordinance 392-2022, adopting by reference the police department's military use equipment policy. In September of 2021, the mayor signed AB 481. This piece of legislation required all police agencies in the state of California to adopt a military equipment use policy and to meet other standards. The stated intent of this legislation was to provide transparency into police departments' inventory of what they deem military equipment, how it is used and how it is purchased, and to make sure that the governing body for these police agencies was aware and approved of such purchases. The policy, the state gave guidelines on what the policy had to include, and foremost in that was how these pieces of equipment were purchased, how much they cost, where the funding came from, how they were going to be used in the future, and what training was required by the officers that were going to use them. Attached to this is the military equipment policy that we hope to adopt for the Rio Police Department. Included in it is an inventory of the equipment we currently have. The equipment that the legislature defined as military equipment generally is that which would be used by a SWAT team or for riot control. The Rio Police Department does not currently have a member on the county SWAT team, although that could change in the future, and any equipment needed that meets their definition would have to be approved by your council. We do not have any equipment for riot control at this point in time, nor have we been asked impact weapon use at distance. The costs and maintenance costs for those items are outlined in the inventory. We do not have any immediate plans to purchase anything in the next fiscal year that would need that, but down the road we may. One of the things we've considered buying is a drone, basically a commercial quality drone. And that would be something that would be required to come before your board for approval. So in addition to adopting this policy, the legislation requires that the policy be reaffirmed by your council on a yearly basis. And the police department is required to hold a public meeting once a year where we can discuss our military equipment use and policy and answer questions that the public may have. So that's my presentation. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions and recommend that this item be continued. And the city attorney suggested the date that it come back to is June 21st. I'm not sure of the rationale by that. There may be something in the legislation that requires a 30 days between the two readings.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodall.
No questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Wilson.
No question.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. Chief, we have half a dozen patrol rifles. I assume those are 223 or caliber.
They are all AR-15 based 223 caliber.
The military is going to 6.8 caliber. And right now, yes, their budget is billions of dollars to do this conversion. Do you see us getting more sophisticated weapons in the future?
I haven't researched the new military cartridge. I actually have an AR-15 in 6.8 that belongs to me personally. I do not believe that the increase in efficiency would be worth the replacement of the rifles we currently have at this point in time. And because it is not legal for the average citizen in the state of California to purchase an AR-15, it would be slightly more difficult for us to surplus the current items we have. So I don't really foresee us doing something like that in the near future. But the new chief may have different plans for all I know too, so.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Are there any questions from the community? None, hearing none. Hand raised. Emails? Having no questions, I will ask for a motion to approve the first reading and continue it to June 21st.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote.
I want to walk off.
Motion carries 5-0. And with that, we come to council reports and communications. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Connors. I will be missing the HCAR meeting coming Thursday. Travel. One of the things that is going to be in the presentation at that HCAR meeting is going to be coming to explain why the state and the HCOG needs to provide more money for the Indian Hole interchange. This is a project that dates back decades. And HCOG initially was the prime funding source for it, but when the design got so expensive, HCOG didn't have enough money. $30 million wasn't enough money to build the interchange. And so the state stepped in and Caltrans said, hey, we'll help you out, we'll do the additional funding. The project was advertised some months ago, and there were a handful of bidders, all of them 15 to 20% over the engineer's estimate. And I might say that a portion of that project, what we call design build, and that is the contractor would actually do the design of the project. And the contractors looked at that, or the bidders looked at that, and they said, we really don't want much to do with that. So they all put in what we call bid protests, which means that there's gonna be a legal fight from day one or before day one until well after the project is completed. So based upon that, Caltrans said, hey, we'll redesign this and take the risk away from the bidders. And doing so, now they've come back and said, hey, we need more money. And so Julie's gonna ask them, why in the world did you guys mess up so bad? And how much more money are you gonna provide? Because HCOG doesn't have any more money. So anyway, there we go.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter?
We have a nuisance abatement committee meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. here. And I had to miss all my meetings because I got a cold over the last few weeks. So no reports for me.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Wilson?
Yeah, I had a finance committee meeting with RCEA for the future budget, which they're gonna present, I think in June. They may introduce it in May, but they'll go to June to be approved, but what they're catching up on their numbers is PG&E has done 2 rate increases this year, and the numbers that they're increasing their budget from 50-something million to 90-something million, which exceeds everybody combined except the county. And so their prices will go up because PG&E is going up that much. Is what you're all seeing here, the electricity and your, which seems like it's going to continue to escalate. Great.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodall?
No, just the nuisance abatement tomorrow, as Amanda mentioned, and HCOG on Thursday.
Thank you. And I went to a leadership conference and there was some very interesting information given out. And if anyone wants any of that information, I can provide the PowerPoints so that you can, there was everything from stormwater to the care that you were mentioning, quick care core that you were mentioning, and diversity training. And it was a very interesting bunch of meetings. And I spoke with Assemblyman Wood and with Senator McGuire and talked about important things for Rio Dell that I don't know if I can talk about here, but it had to do with something we're all put on our priority list. It's recently. Hopefully we get some assistance from our legislators. And the one person I was saying that I was hoping we could get to come and give us a presentation on earthquake retrofitting, seismic retrofitting for the community, actually individuals, not just not the cities specifically, but individuals in the city, community members and commercial properties, is with the California Earthquake Authority. And she has just a tremendous amount of information. And the one thing that she was very clear on is that Humboldt County, they decide how they give the grants based on zip codes, but Humboldt County is definitely has been approved and has been awarded grants in this area. So I have reached out to her to ask her to give a presentation to the council and hopefully via Zoom to our community so that we can get that message out. And that is all I have. And so with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Have a motion in a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned until June 7th.